All right, let's do this. Happy New Year. I haven't seen all of you since last year. That is an old joke. It is overused, but I will keep using it until the end of time. I'm really happy to be here. How many of you heard about that Alaska Airlines plane story? Did anybody hear about that? Man, wasn't that crazy? For those of you that didn't, apparently just one of the plane doors just popped out 20 minutes into the flight. So they're way up there, thousands of feet in the air, and a door just boom, just completely detaches from the plane. Now, lucky for the passengers that were supposed to sit on that row, they actually missed their flight. So if you're ever running late, know that the Lord might be keeping you from something. Why did I tell you that story? I don't know. It was interesting. Fun facts with Dani the lad. But anyways, before we get started today, why don't you give yourself a round of applause today? Why don't you give yourself a round of applause? Now, why are we clapping right now, Dani? Well, that was to prove to you that you'll do anything the guy on the stage says to. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. No, I want to commend you for being here, for starting the year in the best way, which is with other believers, with other people your age, wanting to grow in your faith. Now, I understand not all of you are here for that reason. I know some of you are only here because you want to make your parents happy. Some of you are only here because you were forced to be here. And maybe you're here because you're going to ask your parents in a few days to let you go somewhere with some friends, and so you're just getting your youth group attendance credit in. You can't fool me. I am familiar with your game. I lived through it as well. But either way, for whatever reason it is, you are here today. And so why not believe that God may have something for you today from his word? Why not believe that tonight might be the night that sets the tone for the rest of the year? Maybe some of you have New Year's resolutions. Maybe you're already, 10 days in and you've already broken all of them and you feel like, man, well, there goes another year. I guess I'll start again in 2025. Some of you, maybe your New Year's resolution was to start coming to youth group more. So whatever the case may be, let's believe that God has something for us today, and let's get right into it. As you saw up here on the screen, we're starting a new series, and it's called Koinonia. Now, koino what? What does that word mean, koinonia? Chances are it's a word most of you have never even heard before. Honestly, I had never heard this word before until about Monday when Jake came up to us and said, hey, I have a great idea for a series. I had never heard it either, but it is a powerful word. Now, this is not a word that you guys will just say Harry Potter style and stuff will appear and disappear. It's not that kind of word. But this is a word that is defined as a Christian's fellowship or communion with God, or more commonly with other believers. So koinonia. Everybody say koinonia. Koinonia. Man, that just sounds so fancy, right? Koinonia. Okay. So our new series is all about that. It's about community. Now, if you're one of those high schoolers that's sitting here today and you're already saying, all right, yeah, this sermon's not really for me. I'm not a fan of people. Hey, you're not alone. I'd challenge you, though, don't tune out. Because deep within all of us is a true desire for us to be known and to be loved. And it's a desire that didn't just show up there. It's a desire that God put inside all of us. That's because loneliness, it's not the story that we were created for. We were not put on this world to go through life alone. And yet many of us experience that time and time again. And so today we want to help you, which is why we're talking about overcoming loneliness. Overcoming loneliness. All right. Now, full disclaimer, I feel like the least qualified person to talk about overcoming loneliness. I was just thinking I just moved here a month ago. I don't know half of you. If I've tried to talk to you, you've already noticed I'm not the best at starting conversations. I'm awkward. I don't know. And if I haven't talked to you yet, look out. I'm coming for you. I'm going to find you. It's going to be great. But I realized I could sit here and list excuse after excuse after excuse as to why I won't overcome loneliness or why I won't talk to people. And the reality is you probably can do the same. You could probably sit here and talk about why you don't want to talk to people or connect with people. Maybe you're pulling the introvert card. By the way, show of hands. How many of you would consider yourself an introvert? Okay, gotcha. If you were really an introvert, you wouldn't have raised your hand. How about that? Here we go. Totally messing with you. I make a lot of jokes. But maybe that's you. Maybe you're like, hey, you know what? I'm really introverted. I don't like talking to people. Maybe you're like, I don't like those people over there. They're nerds. Or those people over there, all they do is talk about sports. It's not my thing. It doesn't fit with my Enneagram number. It's not my personality type. I'm a candy corn or a cat, whatever it's called, a Capri Sun, whatever it is. Those dudes over there, I know they aren't the real thing. Those girls over there, I know they're fake. I know they say nice to see you, but they don't really mean it. So I'm not a big people person. Maybe that's you. Maybe you feel the same way. But again, what if these excuses have actually kept us from experiencing one of the most fulfilling parts of life? What if the fear of the awkward has actually made us the awkward ones? How about that? What if this is the year that God wants you to experience koinonia, authentic, genuine community? Are you ready for it? Well, even if you're not, you're coming with me. So let's go through a few verses together. They're going to be up here on the screen. I really want to encourage you, don't tune out, all right? Help me overcome loneliness from the stage, so don't leave me hanging, okay? So let's go through this together. Because when we talk about overcoming loneliness, we have to talk about the full thing. So let's start right at the beginning, Genesis. And chances are, if you've gone to church for any period of time, you've probably heard the creation story. That God created the heavens, the earth, plants, animals, the stars, even people. He did this all in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. Now, if you're new to faith, if you're here for the first time, you're new to this whole Christianity thing, church thing, hey, welcome, glad you're here. That is what Christians believe, and we get that from the book of Genesis. We believe that God created everything, and it tells us that after creating everything, he called it good. He called everything that he made good, except for one thing. Genesis 2:18 tells us this. God said, then the Lord said, it is not good that the man should be alone. Now, as my good buddy Gabe pointed out earlier this week, this was said before sin had even entered the world, which tells us two things. That our loneliness is not necessarily a result of sin entering the world. Second, it also tells us that it is not in our design, that we were not created to be alone. We weren't created to go through this life by ourselves. We weren't created to be the lone wolf. Now, for those of you who love nitpicking words, I was the same way, so I totally understand you. Maybe you're reading this verse and you're like, well, it says it's not good that the man should be alone. I'm a woman, so that doesn't apply to me. No, the scriptures tell us the same idea for all of us in different places. For example, Ecclesiastes 4:9 tells us, not Fortnite, 4:9, it says, two are better than one. 1 Corinthians 12:14 says, for the body does not consist of one member, but of many. Now, when it says body here, it's talking about the church. It's talking about the community of believers. It does not consist of just one person, one member, but many. Proverbs 18:1 also has the same idea. It says this, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire, and he breaks out against all sound judgment. So if you want to go through this life without sound judgment, isolate yourself. And I know it sounds silly, but that's what a lot of us tend to do. And so if Scripture is clear on loneliness not being what we are designed for, how do we overcome this complex issue? As high schoolers, you know that loneliness is not necessarily about being surrounded. Like, I want you to think about your situation, about your life for a little bit, some instances. Isn't it funny how some of our times where we felt most accompanied, most blessed by the people around us, it was when we were just spending time with one person. That best friend or that teammate. It's just one person. And at the same time, there's been other times where we felt super, super lonely, super unseen, super forgotten, and yet we were completely surrounded by people. We were in a big group. It's a crazy thing. And so who can help us to overcome this complex issue of loneliness? Where can we turn? And the truth is, a lot of us do turn to different places to try to overcome this loneliness. The problem is we've tried to cover a hole with a Band-Aid. We've tried to turn to things that weren't designed to fulfill or to fill that feeling that we have. And so it's left us feeling helpless and hopeless many times. Let me give you some examples. Some of us, in order to overcome loneliness or forget about the feeling of loneliness, we turn to entertainment. Let me forget about how alone I feel by watching as many episodes of my favorite Netflix series as possible until I run out and it's an emergency because now I got to go find a new series. Or let me forget about how alone I feel by just watching funny videos. Let me just forget about how alone I feel by shopping it all away. And so you order package after package. By the way, does anybody love receiving like a package? It just feels like a little mini Christmas gift. I love it. But sometimes we use that to try to cover a bigger need that we have. Or maybe we say, all right, let me sport it all away. That is to say, let me get really, really good at this sport so that people respect me, or at the very least, they want to be around me. Or, as I remember in my high school years, I would say, oh, let me be the class clown. Let me be the guy who makes everybody laugh and just tells jokes, no matter how bad they are, just so that I can feel accepted. Confession, don't tell anybody. After making those jokes, I tell you, I would feel alone when I would go home because there was no purpose in that. There wasn't a genuine purpose in that. And yes, I cried 1 or 2 or 3, or a lot of nights, we'll just leave it at that, after being the class clown for a full day. Or nowadays, and some of you maybe, I hope, aren't doing this right now, we also turn and say, hey, let me just put in my AirPod in right now and just isolate myself. Let me just turn to that. I don't want to worry about feeling alone. I'm going to put in my music in my AirPods, music with lyrics that tells me that I don't need anybody. And yet, the opposite effect is happening. And that's because the hole of loneliness in our hearts cannot be filled by anything in this world. Let me say it again for the people in the back. All right. Okay, I just messed it up again. The hole of loneliness in our hearts cannot be filled by anything in this world. And that's because friends, high schoolers, or maybe you don't consider yourself a friend, acquaintances. I love all of you. People leave. Things change. Money runs out. Injuries happen. Winter break ends. The momentary highs go away. And yet, we have someone who experienced all of this and understands everything that we are going through. And it's Jesus, the Son of God. And maybe you're thinking, okay, Dani, Jesus understands my loneliness. Jesus couldn't possibly, wasn't he the Son of God? Wasn't he perfect? Isn't it that he was without sin? And yet, the scriptures encourage us to remember that Jesus is in heaven right now as our high priest, as one who represents us, as one who intercedes on our behalf, who presents our needs before the Father. Don't believe me? Check out Hebrews 4:14 and 15. It says this, therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses. So he is able. He can empathize. He can relate with our struggles, friends, because he went through it too. If you're taking notes, you can write this down. Jesus experienced loneliness. Jesus experienced loneliness too. Okay, Dani, so Jesus experienced loneliness. How do I know that? Matthew 27:46. This is a moment where Jesus is on the cross. He's on his last breaths. He's about to give up his life. And Matthew 27:46 tells us this. And at about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. I probably mispronounced that. I think it's Greek. That is, or Aramaic, my God, why have you forsaken me? And so Jesus experienced loneliness on the cross. You can write that down. There's going to be 3 of them. Jesus experienced loneliness on the cross. Just before his death, he experienced abandonment. That is to say, the unity with the Father and the Spirit that he had been a part of for all of eternity past was fractured at the cross. He was truly abandoned to die. But there was a purpose in his abandonment. The Bible tells us that Jesus endured the cross for the joy set before him. Now, I need to remind some of you, or maybe introduce the idea to some of you, that crucifixions were not fun at all. They would nail you to a wooden cross. They probably didn't develop it as nicely as this one, and it had splinters on it, I'm sure, but the victims would be bleeding to death, literally suffocating to death. It was not pleasant. And yet, the Bible tells us that Jesus endured this cross for the joy set before him. Now, what was this joy? What could possibly bring the Son of God, who was experiencing heaven, who was with the Father, who was with the Spirit, and everything was great up there? What could possibly have made the King come down from heaven? What was that joy? That joy was you and me. That was the joy set before him. So Jesus experienced loneliness on the cross, but he experienced loneliness to bring you back to the Father. Write that one down as well if you're taking notes. Jesus experienced loneliness to bring you back to the Father. In that moment, Jesus would die for the sins of all who believed in him. He would ensure that all who placed their trust in him would return to the Father along with him. That at the end of all things, there would be this great assembly of believers from every part of the world. Believers from the United States of America, bald eagle screeches. Believers from Mexico, I would do the shout, but I don't want to ruin my vocal cords. Believers from Madagascar who love to move it. Believers from all over the world. Jesus made it so that this would be so. So that this great assembly of believers would be with our Creator forever. But let me tell you, we don't have to wait till heaven to experience koinonia with the Father, with our Creator, because Jesus made a way for that. Scripture tells us that when Jesus died, the curtain in the temple was torn in two. Now, it's not just a side detail if you've ever read the story, how it's written out in Matthew or any of the Gospels. It's not just a minor detail. There is significance there because this curtain had always separated people from God. Imagine if you came in here today and people were singing and worshiping, or maybe the pastor was preaching, or maybe, somebody was up here, but there was a big old curtain here. You couldn't see anything. And that's how things were back then. Normal people could not come to God because they had sinned, because they were unholy, because they were not worthy to be in the presence of God. People could not be in that holiest place. They had to have a priest, they had to have a representative to go in there into that holy place and pray that that priest had not sinned, because if he had sinned, he would die on the spot. And that person was supposed to represent the people of God. And well, that high priest is now Jesus. And that curtain was torn. It no longer separates us from God. That is to say, today you can boldly approach the throne of God with confidence. See, when you have a need, when you feel alone, when you have a desire that only God can meet, you don't have to come and say, oh, Father, I don't want to bother you again. Like, I know I prayed the other day for this, and I don't know, I'm having a hard time trusting you. No, you can approach the throne of grace with confidence because of what Jesus did. In fact, Jesus, he was called Emmanuel, and it means God with us. And so that's the third thing I want you to write down. Jesus experienced loneliness so that you no longer have to. I originally had put so that you never have to again. But the truth is, many of us still experience loneliness. But you no longer have to. We have direct access to the Father because of what Jesus did. And so to all who have received him, life looks way different. There's a different hope about you. There's a different joy about you. Your circumstances might not be the best. Your family might be in a mess. You might not have the grades that you wanted. You might get back that letter from that school that you were applying to saying, rejected. You might have things go the worst possible way that you could imagine. But there's something different about you because you're no longer alone. He has promised to be with us until the end of the age. And so remembering this can help us overcome our loneliness. In short, if you haven't been paying attention, or if you want a nice little phrase to write down to summarize this sermon, I still got more, but write this down right here. Loneliness ends when we look up. Loneliness ends when we look up. And I know it sounds ridiculous. Okay, Dani, you're saying to stop feeling alone as a high schooler in 2024 in McKinney, Texas, all I got to do is walk around like this. And that, I know, I get it. It sounds ridiculous, but hold up, let me cook, all right? I will cook. Yes, the biggest help in overcoming loneliness is looking up and recognizing that God is with us. That because of Jesus, we are not alone. But we must also remember something very important, friends, and I don't want you to miss this. Part of overcoming that loneliness is in seeing and interacting with the people around us. And so again, I say, loneliness ends when we look up. Anybody got a phone with them real quick? Yeah, that one right there. I'll borrow it real quick. Thank you. Round of applause for our volunteer here. Thank you. Loneliness ends when we look up. Because if we're honest today, the normal default for high schoolers in this day and age is not looking up. Isn't that right? You go into an assembly, what's everybody doing? You ride on the bus, and instead of throwing pencils and erasers like my generation used to, we got in trouble for it, but it was fun, everybody's like, you'll be sitting next to the person on your bus, and you'll be like, hey man, how was your day? Hey man, it was great. Awesome. We don't even talk anymore. Some of you think I don't see you. Some of you have been like this the whole time since I started preaching. You think I don't see you. But normally, we are not looking up. Gyms, we're not looking up. I know gyms are like your zone, right? Nobody wants to look at anybody. But everywhere you go, the normal is this. The normal is this. Thank you. But we aren't, she was getting nervous. Where's my phone? But we aren't meant to go through this life disengaged, disconnected from the people who God has placed in our life. That nerdy kid, that kid who smells, that kid who's got no jump shot, that kid who's a devoted gamer, the kid wearing the Dunks or the one wearing the Goodwill 360s, like both of them are people that God has put in your life. Both are there for you to be blessed by them and to bless them as well. And we need to realize that the people in our lives, they aren't just extras. I know there's a phrase going around like, oh, main character energy and all that. But the thing is, these people are not just side characters in our life. They're people that God put in our lives to experience koinonia with. A genuine fellowship. One where we care about each other, connect with each other, build each other up. And sometimes, and this one might sting a little bit, and this one might be uncomfortable a little bit, but sometimes that means taking the first step. I know, who does that, right? True, it might be nerve-wracking to do so. Honestly, talking to some of you, I'm super nervous. Like, I don't even know what's cool nowadays. So sometimes I'll make jokes that are from like 2015, and kids are like, what the heck is he talking about? Like, it's awkward for me too. I want you to know that. But let's remember that Jesus took the first step towards us. Let's remember that Jesus didn't stay comfortable and say, all right, let's see how those puny little humans get up here. I don't think they're going to. That's your problem for sinning, boy. But here's the thing. Jesus did not stay on his throne. He left the comforts of heaven to reach out to us. So how could we not do the same? Hebrews 10, 24 and 25 tells us this. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. And this one's important, 25. Not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some. A lot of people have experienced loneliness in 2023 because they neglected to meet together. They said, oh yeah, Wednesday nights, you know what? I'd rather go to blank. Wednesday nights, I know I had like rehearsal or an event or something on Monday and Tuesday. I'm tired. I don't want to go. Sundays, man, I don't understand the thing that they're talking about. I don't want to go. But this tells us not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near, the day of the return of our Lord. It's coming. It'll be at a time when none of us expected. None of us know the day, the hour, the time. But it's drawing near. And so what we ought to do as we wait for his return, for the return of the one who left heaven for us, is we need not neglect to meet together, but encourage one another. That's what he asks us to do. So if you want to overcome loneliness, let's live this out. Let's look up and see that God is with us. Let's look up from our screens and see that there are people around us. Let's see them, encourage each other. Let's treasure this gathering right here on Wednesday nights. And so as we close, I always like to leave the students, the high schoolers, wherever I speak, I always like to leave a so what of sorts, a question to get us wrestling, to get us thinking about. And my question for you tonight is this. What does looking up look like for you? What does looking up look like for you? It could be that maybe you're new to the faith, or maybe you've been on the sidelines of faith for a while. Maybe you're saying, oh, I'll figure that out when I get older. I'll figure that out when I turn 21. I'll figure that out when I'm in college. I'll figure that out after graduating from college. And I shared this with the middle schoolers last week, and I don't share this to scare you, but when I started student ministry in 2019, in 2020, a high schooler died, got hit by a train. In 2021, a middle schooler got accidentally shot by his brother. And there were other instances as well that were in student ministry. We don't know. Heaven forbid, but there are crazy drivers out there. And we do not have a guarantee of tomorrow, friends. And Jesus left his throne in heaven, the comforts of heaven, the glory of heaven, the fellowship with the Father and the Spirit, so that you don't have to take a chance on eternity. And so why wait until you're older? Why wait until you're a perfect theologian? None of us are. So it's time to overcome loneliness. And so for you, is it looking up and recognizing, hey, I need to get right with God. I need to accept this great love of him. I need to recognize that I can't do this on my own. Is that it for you? Or does looking up, in your case, look like switching from your default, from being locked into that screen? Does it look like coming in here and instead of shying away in the corner and saying, I'll just wait till somebody comes up to me and sees me, taking that first step and saying, no, I have to be intentional. Talk with others. Yeah, maybe we don't agree about the same things. We don't have the same tastes. We don't look the same. We don't dress the same. We don't smell the same. I don't know. Like, what if God might be calling you to be the person that looks up in 2024? Says, this is the year that I'm going to make intentional relationships. This is the year that I'll experience koinonia. And so God is surely challenging you from his word, not from me, from his word tonight. God is putting something in your heart, even right now, that he wants you to do this year, that he wants you to do this week. So let's pray together and ask for God to help us to obey. Father, thank you so much because you sent your son for us. You didn't send him here to just enjoy 80 years of life and enjoy everything that this world has to offer. You send him here with a mission to give up his life on a cross, a gruesome death, gruesome torture, bleeding out, heartbroken for us. You didn't